We really work with customers of HubSpot that are working on making HubSpot be a full platform that can solve for all of the different things in their business. And that's what makes us so excited about all of the UI extensibility stuff, because it really expands what people can achieve with HubSpot far beyond anything out of the box. And so we're going to talk about why that's awesome. And then we're also going to show you guys some really cool examples to get your juices going on cool stuff that you can do. And Amy has been wonderful in joining me, and I will let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited to be here. My name is Amy Chamness. I'm a product marketing manager here at HubSpot. I support the Smart CRM, which we will talk about what I mean when I say Smart CRM here in a bit. And yeah, I support the product team that has been building out UI extensions. They are unsung heroes. I think some of them are on today's webinar, which we are excited about. And yeah, I think that's it. We can get into an agenda if that makes sense. I don't know, Connor, do you want to start here?
Sure. So this is what we're going to cover. We're going to go through a quick background on HubSpot evolution over time, how HubSpot's changed as a platform, which leads into where they are today, which is the Smart CRM, which I'll then let Amy tell you what that means and why it's exciting and everything else. We'll then touch a little bit on HubSpot and extensibility as it relates to the Smart CRM, what we mean when we say that, how you can do some of those pieces. We'll talk about why extensibility exists, why it's so exciting. I'm going to touch a little on what this means to the ecosystem. I know that we have a lot of HubSpot partners that are in the mix. I know that there are a lot of customers that currently work with HubSpot partners. We're really excited about this because we think it's going to really fundamentally change what types of services HubSpot partners are able to deliver for customers, and also what customers can be able to access by working with people that are really dedicated and focused to building things with HubSpot as a practice, and how extensibility enables that to exist. And then we'll get into everyone's favorite part, which is we have a couple of core use cases that we've built out, we've set up, that we're going to be able to show you and speak to. These are high level concepts. We're not getting into a how to build stuff necessarily, though. I think John McLaren and a bunch of folks on the developer advocacy team are doing amazing content around that. And I would recommend going and connecting with them. And they have another webinar, I think, coming up also for developer centric audiences. And that is the broad strokes of what we're going to go through. And again, Justin just put this in the chat, but please, if you are joining us, throw stuff into the Q&A. We'll have the Q&A section. We'll answer your questions. We want this to be interactive. We'll be able to touch on all of those things. And so with that, I'll start with my history lesson, which if you come to any of the things that I do, or if you follow me on LinkedIn, you've probably seen this diagram. It is my favorite thing to show to people to help them understand what's going on with HubSpot. And so if we think about sort of the HubSpot of yore, right? And from sort of founding through 2014, HubSpot, the marketing software company, the tool that lets you do emailing and landing pages and SEO optimization and all of the things that marketers sort of want to be able to do with their marketing software. And HubSpot was really focused on how can we build an amazing marketing software business, an amazing marketing software product that helps marketers achieve their hopes and dreams. And in 2014, HubSpot added in the CRM with the Sales Hub launch and started adding in some fundamental basic CRM functionality, tracking maybe companies and contacts and meeting links and sales activity, and sort of pulling in that sales and marketing journey to one thing. And then with Service Hub in 2017, HubSpot really came out and said, hey, we are an amazing SMB CRM product. If you are a small business and you want a CRM, we have an amazing one, and it's easy to use and it's great, and you should really work with it. And so if you've only really seen or worked with HubSpot, and hopefully we have, whether you are a prospect or whether a user of a different platform, and maybe someone at HubSpot or your partner told you to come to this webinar, if your experience with HubSpot precedes 2021, you're really missing a little bit of how much HubSpot has changed just in the last couple of years. And so the last big junction point, and I'm going to create sort of a parallel here between what we're going to talk about with the UI extensibility, which I think is as big and as important as what happened in 2021, which I think was sort of the last giant milestone platform changing event, which was HubSpot added in custom objects. So now you can build whatever data model you want inside of HubSpot, and you're no longer relegated to companies or contacts or deals. You can create any object you might manage in your business, whether it's an order or whether it's an inventory item or anything else under the sun that you track and manage for your company. And what that means is HubSpot now becomes this platform that you can build and customize and expand for the needs of your business. And then HubSpot gave us both Operations Hub as well as serverless functions, which lets us no longer be limited by out-of-the-box code or out-of-the-box actions that you can do in HubSpot. But now you can actually customize and develop on top of HubSpot and make it do things that it doesn't do out of the box when you set it up. And that was sort of the last big giant junction point that happened that redefined what HubSpot is capable of. And now what is happening, which is very, very exciting, is we are moving not just from the CRM platform world, where HubSpot is a CRM platform that supports all sorts of scaling businesses of a huge range of size, and even companies as large as HubSpot themselves, and now into the Smart CRM, which will do so much more. But what does that mean? Why do we care about it? We have Amy here, and she's going to tell you all about it.
Yeah, it's a loaded question, but it's a really exciting one to answer. So we unveiled the Smart CRM at Inbound 2023 this year in sort of junction with this UIE launch and additional launches throughout the other hubs. I think one of the things that's really interesting, especially when looking at this graph that Connor has, is HubSpot has spent a ton of time historically bulking up our functionality and our feature offerings. So we have custom objects, we have Ops Hub, Operations Hub, we have acquisitions like PieSync that basically do more of that, right? Bulking up our feature offerings. What we're doing as we transition from a CRM platform, which underpins all of the engagement hubs that sit on top of it, and moving into the Smart CRM, is rather than simply just adding more ways for you to store information in the CRM, we're adding in intelligence and ways for the CRM to actually provide an opinion and a recommendation and take some of the thinking load and the brain power off of the users and pull it directly into the CRM. So there's a couple of different ways to think about this. One of the ways that I think about it is just, what do I mean by Smart CRM? What is the literal value proposition? So when we think about the CRM platform or CRM platforms in any context historically, they typically would tell you that we're going to unify data, right? HubSpot talked about that a ton, right? Having non-siloed data, having all of your data on one platform. That's still true, but in a Smart CRM, that happens by default, meaning there's nothing you, the user, has to do. If you're an admin or you're implementing HubSpot, that data is going to be unified by default, meaning all of those engagement hubs, Ops Hub, any new engagement hub, Service Hub, Marketing Hub, they all access and live on top of the same database. The second value proposition here is that it offers a really easy way to customize data models and interfaces throughout the tool. That took a giant step forward with UI Extensibility and CRM configuration and customization, which is what we're going to talk about today. But it's broader than just configuring interfaces or default spaces within HubSpot, like record pages. It's also the ability to really customize your data model, like using custom objects, but that's also including things like really honing in on how your data model and how your data objects are associated to each other, and configuring things like your user permissions. And really a key element of the Smart CRM is not that it's simply easy to customize, but again, the CRM provides an opinion about how you might want to customize your data model or how you might want to customize certain spaces like pipelines and so forth. And then lastly, providing intelligence rather than simply information across your teams and processes. So this takes a ton of different forms, whether that's literally providing smart recommendations when you're forming an association or building a calculated property or importing users. This come up in a ton of different places, but the key idea is, rather than just being a place where you store information, which is how we think about legacy CRMs, simply being databases, a Smart CRM is something that actually provides intelligence based off of that information and data you store in it. So I've mentioned some of these, but a couple of key features that I think sort of fit into this space are things like record page configuration. This is sort of the admin facing version of configuring a record page, like a contact record, for example, really configuring that middle column. UI Extensibility is a great example. Connor's going to talk about that a ton. Conditional logic. So we at Inbound launched the ability to have conditional properties or conditional property options, and then user permissions, more granular user permissions, which you're going to see more of this quarter and into 2024. And I do want to just take a quick step back and put this in some broader context. So Connor mentioned a couple of words when he was giving us a very well-detailed history lesson, and one of them was platform, which is a really interesting word. We think about it a lot at HubSpot. And the Smart CRM in and of itself is not a platform, right? You'll notice that I'm specifically not calling it a Smart CRM platform. I'm not calling it a CRM platform. It's a Smart CRM, but it does live within the context of a platform. We think of HubSpot as being a customer platform. And we think of a customer platform having a couple of key pieces, specifically 3 key product layers. And I've talked about most of these, but not all of them. So we have the engagement hubs, and these are powered by AI, and they form, I guess, a system of engagement. So whether that's Marketing Hub, engaging with your customers or your audience, Sales Hub, where you're engaging with your prospects and leads, Service Hub, where you're engaging with your customers, and so forth. All of those sit on top of the Smart CRM, which we've talked about, an AI-powered system of record. And all of that sits on top of our ecosystem, where we have our academy, our marketplace, our community, folks like you, anybody on this call, right, being part of our community. And so I just wanted to sort of ground the Smart CRM and what we're talking about within the context of the customer platform, which is how we define HubSpot more broadly.
Something I love about this diagram, and I know at Inbound Andy showed something that was similar and had the wonderful HubSpot design team instead of the one that we have here. But I think that what it covers on that, which I think is awesome, is showing how a sales hub or a service hub or a marketing hub lives on top of and engages with that smart CRM, and that smart CRM layer being unified against everything. And I think whether you are using a different product or tool, or maybe you're sort of looking at or thinking about HubSpot, I think that that's a really fundamental philosophical difference in terms of how HubSpot builds product and how it actually functions and will work for your business, or if you're a partner and you talk to prospects. I think this is a really, really compelling component of this, because really it's one CRM system on that smart CRM, and then all of these engagement layers that sort of are adding function or department or user journey specific features and functionality on top of that same core smart CRM, versus having a system or a tool for each individual department and then trying to sync and connect and flow data across all of those different products. And I think that's really the thing where I think HubSpot becomes so exciting and so powerful, is everything is on that same smart CRM. And I think that is a concept is hard to understand how significantly different that is, but is also difficult to even overstate the impact that it makes to how everything works.
Yeah. You make a really good point there. We think a ton about not leaving any team, whether they're front office or not, behind. And though this visual is very static, I have not thought of a clever way of demonstrating in a visual context what I'm about to say. We often think of the smart CRM having a kinetic energy to it, right? It doesn't just underpin all of your engagement hubs, but it actually provides a sense and a way of keeping all of those engagement hubs in concert. So your service team, your sales team, your operational team, whether that's RevOps or otherwise, we want them to not only have access to all of the same data, which is why they all sit on top of a smart CRM, but we also want them to all move forward and progress at the same rate. And we really believe that you can't have any part of the customer journey siloed away or not have access to the same opinions, recommendations, intelligence that another team has. So I think it's a really good point. And if anybody has a smart way to represent that kinetic energy, let me know. But the idea being, whenever we build a tool for the smart CRM, we have to ensure that it is accessible to all engagement hubs, if that makes sense, or if it's applicable. And we have to make sure that it is well permeated throughout the entire platform, whether that's engagement hubs, CRM, the ecosystem. We really make sure that it feels unified, again, by default, which was one of the props. I think, but my memory is not great here. Yes, that was the end of the Smart CRM history lesson here. So Connor, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah. So I think when we talk about extensibility, this is kind of the amalgamation of what we mean, right? I already saw some question from some folks. Matt, I'm going to touch on this on the next slide around what skill set does somebody have if they're building on this? And I think this is where we really see the difference between sort of like a HubSpot admin of someone who's configuring and administering and managing the platform and using, and you can do tremendous amounts of things there. So by no means am I underselling the impact of what that can have on an organization. But when we talk about extensibility, we start to move past administration and into architecture and development and how you can actually build on top of HubSpot and expand what HubSpot's capable of. And so folks that have been doing either have advanced HubSpot sort of platforms and implementations, or maybe some partners in the space might be working with APIs and integrations and building custom objects and defining a data model. And I think some of the more advanced folks in the last year or so have started to do a lot with Ops Hub and actually coding actions and writing development and code into HubSpot to extend beyond beyond just the out-of-the-box functionality. And I think this new layer of having UI extensions allows us to do so much. And so what I want to do is talk about what that means, and when we say that, where that is. And one forward from Matt's question here, which is what skill set matters as we're looking at some of these on our intro to UI extensions. We went one forward and then we went back
I
one.
don't know if you wanted to live here.
Oh, yes, I apologize. So for this, right? So there's kind of two different ways that you can do UI extensions in HubSpot. And so Matt had asked around what skill set does somebody have? I think the biggest thing to look into if you're looking to either expand your team, if you're a service provider, or if you're a customer and you're looking to hire direct, or if you're looking to work with a partner, React is really kind of the main thing that some of those native UI extensions are going to be built in. And so with React, you're going to get a lot of layout flexibility. You're going to get better design elements. You have enhanced performance because those React extensions are running inside of HubSpot, right? And so in that portal, that's where the code is running. You don't have to worry about hosting. You don't have to build another application. Everything that you're going to build and run is going to get installed into HubSpot, and it's going to run inside of HubSpot. So the other value of that, if you're a HubSpot customer, is maybe if you're used to either other platforms or in the past that maybe you work with a provider, they give you some custom application, but now you're paying a managed service fee to them, or you're stuck on that other application. And if you aren't paying them, or if you leave them and maybe you want to manage it in-house, or you want to go to another vendor, you can't, right? Because they host that middleware, they have the keys, and unless they move it to you and you now have to worry about hosting it, it creates all of these problems. And historically, that's why a lot at Aptitude 8, we were pretty reticent on building those kinds of things, because we didn't want to lock customers in to having to have us in order to get value out of their platform. The amazing aspect of a lot of these UI extensions is because that's all running in your HubSpot product, you are not dependent on a partner or anyone else to maintain and manage it. And anybody who comes into your HubSpot account and has the right permissions and has the right skill set can go and edit and modify and work with those React extensions. And they're all hosted inside of HubSpot. So you don't need to spin up anything else or build middleware or create anything. It all just lives right inside of HubSpot, which is incredibly powerful. There are some walled gardens there, right? HubSpot gives you components. They're continuing to add to them since this was announced. I think there's already been a couple of new ones. I think that as we will start to see more and more of those rails move farther and farther out. But there are some rails that you're going to run into today. And in the event that you run into those, the HubSpot team allows you to also iframe in and build a UI extensibility, so you can put information from other systems, other tools, other places onto a HubSpot record, and everything will look extremely native and is there. There is some hosting aspects to that, which is why I think the React cards, if you're able to do things in the React cards, you should. And if you need to go further, you have the option with some of those iframe elements to really expand what you're capable of doing. So I think around questions on who do we look for, I'll touch on that more in the Q&A also. But React is sort of the primary language that you want to focus on and care about. And then having somebody with a lot more knowledge than that is helpful, which we'll get into and we'll talk about.
Yeah, I want to underline, because I think it's such a great point Connor just made, this last point here, that everything appears as a native UI element. That really ties into that Smart CRM definition we just talked about, this idea of things happening by default. One of the reasons we really lean towards having a UI extension as an example instead of iframing information in is, if it's built as a UI extension, if you're a user and you're looking at a record, you're not going to really be able to tell what's customized and what's built by HubSpot. It's all going to look the same. It's all going to behave the same. It's all going to react the same, pun intended. And all of that's really incredible, because it allows you, the developer, guardrails, but those guardrails actually allow you to sort of plug and play a little bit. You're going to run up against some edges, and we're definitely aware of those and working against them. But the idea being, the plug and play element allows you to not have to overthink or do too much brain power to make sure that it looks and feels just like the rest of HubSpot, as opposed to iframing something as an example. So I thought that was a really good point.
I think that did a good job. Terry asked a question around that on how is that different than the current API buildability. I think you touched on that, right? Those React cards are going to, they're going to run on HubSpot. So you're not building another application that's interacting with APIs in HubSpot and pushing and pulling data. That the application just runs inside of HubSpot itself. And so you don't host any code. You don't have to authorize anything, or you don't have to authenticate anything. Like, it's all just running inside of HubSpot, all of the advantages that come with that. But that's a pretty significant difference from your iframing something in and you're just representing it in the CRM, you obviously can still iframe those, and you have a lot of power that you can do there too.
Yeah, totally. I think that becomes even more clear when we get to the use cases at the end of this as well.
Yeah, we'll show some stuff.
Cool.
Sweet. Okay. So why we talked a little bit about what the benefits are here, right? But being able to build interactive and dynamic user experiences and actually create ways for HubSpot to do more than what the record itself does. And we're going to show you examples of what that looks like, but being able to expand just what HubSpot is capable of on a record and expand into something that's not only, oh, here's some feature that HubSpot doesn't have, but more interestingly, here's something that your business needs very specifically to you, right? You need to build this micro application that is something you need for the way that you operate. And you're not going to be able to get from any out of the box solution because it's wholly customized to how you run your organization. You can now build those inside of HubSpot, and all of the advantages that come with that, from the data model, the reporting, the automation, everything starts layering together. Being able to actually for people to do their work faster and from one single system in place. There's all the research about the context switching and the managing multiple systems and the OAuthing, and I click a link and I get a code and I open my phone and it slows me down. And so being able to put that all in one place makes your folks a lot more effective. And then obviously the transcription errors. If you're moving from system to system to system, you're just compounding and increasing the opportunity for human error, putting everything in the one record. I think the one other bullet that I should have written here that I think is really important is context. One of the things that happens when people are managing processes across multiple systems, multiple tools, multiple places, is they start to really lose the context versus, oh, I want to ship something to this person. I go to that contact record and I can engage with sort of a shipping workflow or any other type of workflow you might have. And it brings that context directly to what you want to actually access.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the main pieces that you're underlying here is the UI extensibility literally allows you into the user interface, right? So whereas building out an integration via APIs will allow you to pipe data into a user space, it doesn't actually allow you to create a process for a user to then do something with that data, which UI extensibility allows you to do, which I think is really cool.
Okay. This is really, really, really exciting, right? So we actually have done an amazing job. We have almost lost no attendees. So everybody who's sticking around here, I intensely appreciate it because we've gone dense. But I think we're really excited about this, and especially at A8, and we're excited about this for a couple of really big reasons, right? So one of the first ones is historically, HubSpot was really geared towards specific personas and specific audiences, and it had user stories and functions that you could provide for salespeople, for marketing people, for service, and more recently for some of this ops persona. And now what we're excited about is you can build entire functions for folks that aren't even in that core set. And what we're seeing in our customer base is that when you bring some of the finance functionality or finance data into HubSpot, as we're already seeing with some of the Commerce Hub work, the finance team starts using HubSpot. And when you can do this for maybe your shipping team or maybe your on-site team or your field service folks, like as you expand HubSpot functionality itself, you end up bringing more and more and more people into HubSpot, which increases the value of HubSpot for those organizations and the value that HubSpot can provide to those customers. But if you're on the partner side, what gets us really excited is we can now solve problems far beyond those core user personas, and we can build things for people inside of the customers of HubSpot and our customers that can achieve things that they couldn't before. The second component of this is it fundamentally changes the way that we talk to customers and work with customers and do things with customers. So historically, when you interacted with some of these customers, you really were mapping feature to need. You had somebody who had a problem, something somebody wanted to do, and then you're sort of going and saying, okay, well, here's which features could do that. And now what we're doing is really saying, what needs do you have? Here's how we can solve for them. And the solution mapping of the types of ways you can solve those problems grows and scales infinitely. And you're no longer limited to, well, which feature would I use to solve that problem? It's what features would I use that we have? Those maybe are my starting components. And now I can custom and build on top of that. The third component of this is something, and I think I had an inbound talk that was like the rise of the HubSpot developer, something like 2 or 3 years ago. And none of this was there yet. And like the ability you have now is amazing. And I would use, when we were hiring our first developers, I would really be advocating them like, look, there is a whole opportunity for you to be a HubSpot developer. Like that is a thing. You can actually build in all of these different places. And you're not just creating blog templates or email templates or something else. Like you can write coded actions and you can work with APIs. And this is a now whole layer where you can be an application developer that builds on HubSpot, and you can be an architect who designs those applications inside of HubSpot. And that is a whole new career, job, like function that didn't exist. And this now allows for that to be an entire area of function. And I think the main thing that I'd sort of leave with that, right, is this is a fundamental strategic shift of what HubSpot is, what HubSpot is capable of, what HubSpot customers can do with the platform and the product. It's not just a feature launch of here's this new thing and you can do it. It really fundamentally shifts how and the types of problems that HubSpot's capable of solving for customers.
I think that's super applicable also in the way in which our product team is thinking about planning and building beyond just the ability to build a UI extension on a CRM record page. Right now, primarily when you're extending the UI, you're extending that record page, but we are thinking about this again as a strategic shift. So there are many other elements of the HubSpot UI that you can imagine being able to extend, whether that be index pages or preview sidebars, or the list is really endless. I don't have a discrete timeline or roadmap to give you, but I can tell you that this is the way we're thinking about it internally, right? Extensibility is not a single launch moment. It's actually a new way to think about how we build on top of HubSpot and how we build on top of the platform. So it's something we're internally incredibly excited about too.
So I think this makes a huge change in the partner ecosystem, right? And so I think if you are a partner and you're on this webinar, or if you're a customer and you work with the partner, something I would really encourage if you're a partner to think about is how can I evolve to sort of what the service of tomorrow looks like. And I think there's a huge opportunity for everyone in the HubSpot ecosystem. If you're a customer and you're working with a partner, like have the conversation about this functionality with your partner. I think we're going to see a huge rise in partners that are delivering work around this. And so I think today, most partners in the HubSpot ecosystem are focused on onboarding and sort of that getting a customer set up for the first time and helping them use HubSpot and get value out of it for some of those main core hubs. They have a lot of feature expertise on what do different things in HubSpot do. And today, I think a lot of them have sales, marketing, and RevOps specialists or RevOps strategists that are on, hey, let me help you use HubSpot. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I know how to do, is to translate your sales, marketing, or your service need to here's how you do it inside of HubSpot. And I think what we're going to see, and the reason that I think this matters a lot for everyone in the ecosystem, for HubSpotters, for customers, is really a shift in focus to, we're going to see a lot more partners with UX and UI design expertise and actually designing and building these applications that are custom to customers that we look at. A lot more platform developers, not just those front end or CMS-y type folks, but people that are really, and if you have a lot of experience also on the CMS hub or these other components, like you can extend that and learn these pieces. It's not a fundamentally different like skill set, and it's not going to be incredibly different, but I would skill up in those arenas as well, because there's going to be such a need for platform developers that can build applications. And to extend sort of Matt's question earlier, what we find the people that are best at being able to execute this work is, one, it's not one person. We usually see that there's a UX and a UI and a product design component. There's an architecture component. So when we see this, like solutions architects and solutions consultants, people that are actually saying, here is how we should design the data model and the business process, and how does this fit into the overall context of how someone's going to use this product. We have a UX and UI designer who's actually putting together what that application is going to look like and do. And then you have a platform developer who's coding and building that. And so the thing I would caution against is, it's not, I need one person to do the UI extension. It is a whole new service category. And I think that there's so much opportunity in this, because there's going to be a huge influx of customers who want to build these types of things. And so with that, I think we can start to get into what some of those things are, because we have use cases, we have cool stuff to show you. But Amy, if you want to add anything to this, you are more than welcome to as well.
No, I think that's spot on. I am pretty ready to look at some of these use cases.
Cool. All right, let's get into some cool stuff. So what we want to do is we want to show you guys a couple of examples. We have a whole guide for this. We'll have a link that you guys can access that with tons and tons and tons of other examples. But the goal of this is to really get you guys thinking about what you can do and how you can do it. So we're going to go through a couple of these and show you guys what this actually looks like. So some key use cases and high level things that you can think of when you're looking at where does UI extensibility matter and what can UI extensibility empower me to do. One is accessing and actioning data from external sources. We see common use cases with hey, I have an ERP and I need to be able to mark an invoice as, hey, they told me that they're going to make payment even if you haven't seen it yet, or I need to create a shipment, or I need to power some other workflow beyond what my core CRM is managing. And I want to be able to both see that data. And so you could do that historically. Maybe you do an integration, you pass some data records to fields, but also being able to action that data and interact with it and send that both externally out of HubSpot, but also maybe update things inside of HubSpot all in one flow. That's a very good category. I think a lot of people start from, I need to build this bi-directional real-time integration. And what they actually want to do is solve for a couple of key actions, and the data that would come from that integration is super important in order to do that. I think that's a really, really good category. The next piece is customized output based on a series of inputs, which, as I'm reading that and saying it, is a confusing way for me to describe it. But essentially what we see here, and we'll go through some examples, but is being able to have sort of like, think about it like a structured form or dependencies, or have some logic built into how you're entering data, and then have that create a very specific output that you want, which could be contract language, it could be specific line items, it could be a different plan. We'll go through some examples there. And then record specific reports. And I think this is one of the easiest things for people to do. You need to have very little development capability to do this today, but you can actually embed contextual reporting inside of your records. And so something that I've seen this used for already is some ABM type of plays where you want to visualize and see what's going on in this account across a whole bunch of different deals or a whole bunch of different contacts. And you can put that inside of HubSpot and see what that looks like. So I'm going to go into some specific examples that I think are interesting here that people will get excited about, so that you can see how these come together. And Amy, you are more than welcome to expand on anything at any time if I don't give you the window.
Yeah, totally. This isn't an expansion necessarily, but there was a question in the Q&A about being able to create a form inside the contact with these UI extensions and then update that record's property information by an input on the form. And I think you just answered that question, but I thought I'd bring it up in this context, which
that's a great use case, right? Like I have a specific form with specific information and I need people to collect that. And so like examples that immediately rush to mind here is like, oh, they want to submit a return. Like, here's the return form. It's embedded in the record. And when you fill it out, we already know it's for this contact. We can pass all the ID information into it. We can gather that. Similar concept, right? You go to, and this is not just relegated to a contact. Maybe you go to a ticket and you have a return process. Maybe you go to a deal. Maybe you go to another type of object and you have an escalation process. And now we need to fill out a form and say, hey, this customer is frustrated. Here are the issues that they have. And when you fill out that interaction, and maybe this is where you can have very specific inputs that you designate, and that's going to create a ticket. It's going to send an alert. It's going to do all of these different components, and being able to customize a UI window for that means you're not trying to shove that into different places. You're just putting it exactly where those users want to interact with it. That gives them the most context about what they're doing and how.
Yeah, totally. This comes up a ton with referral processes too. The old world solution was to create a form in Marketing Hub and somehow have people bookmark the form and find the form, and it was a really ugly solution. So I think that's a really good use case. But I will divert back to the original talk track here and let you talk about this.
So another one that we've built on a couple of occasions that comes up a lot, right, is sort of like CPQE or deal builder type of interactions. And I think there are a bunch of products that exist on the market today that are really full dedicated CPQ platforms with tons and tons of functionality and deal rooms and contract lifecycle management and all of these pieces. What we find is for like a huge percentage of customers we talk to that are interested in some CPQ functionality is what they actually want to do is say, look, we have all these line items. I need to add 8 line items to a deal. But what I want is for people to select from a couple of packages, right? Like this is my starter package. This is my intermediate package. This is my pro package. And the pro package adds different line items than the intermediate package does. And so you can sort of have these CPQE type of UI elements. And keep in mind, I'm showing this with CPQ in the name or deal builder. This is applicable to any type of object as well. So you can embed this in any record you want and have these UI elements to actually configure and create a unique data entry experience that then outputs data either to HubSpot, right? So you can have this interaction, this UI extension, they hit a button, grabs that data, creates line items on that deal, but you could also send that data to external systems or external interactions as well. And you can expand what you can do in HubSpot pretty limitlessly by having a lot of these building configurator type of experiences. And I think the vast majority of the things that we run into when people are like, oh, well, HubSpot looks awesome, but we need this one user journey or this one specific thing. And if we don't have that, this won't work for us. This is kind of your answer to any of those concerns, which is you can build this UI extension to build a micro app that lives inside of HubSpot on the records and provides context to those users and gives you tremendous power.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to layer on top of this too is we hear a ton of feedback of this, HubSpot's, let's say, line item solution is great, but we need more guardrails. We need more guidance. We don't just want people entering line item data or generating quoting pricing or whatever willy-nilly. This really allows you to set those guardrails and define if-then logic that's baked in here, right? So maybe there's certain discounting rules you want to apply. Maybe there's certain line item combination rules you want to apply. You can also employ some governance as opposed to just an easier user interface into this process, which is pretty powerful. Cool.
Amazing. Okay. This is a continuation of some of that flow, right? Where I talked about some of that bundling. I did a bad job of layering it here, but being able to see in this example, right? We're configuring a couple of different items. We can see sort of how that goes through. We can render and calculate data inside of the React module. And so these are not static, right? I think someone had that example earlier, which was, oh, can I embed a form on a record? Totally. I think where it gets way more exciting is, can I embed a form on a record where depending on how people interact with that form, I'm going to ask them different additional questions. I'm going to calculate something. I'm going to validate something. Like, is this actually, can you enter it in this way? And you can use those React modules to be able to run that code after you interact with it, render a user experience back in front of that person, and either gather different information or query them for additional steps. And this is so, so powerful in terms of really building an application, which is why I talked a little bit about that, like UX and UI design as being a really valuable skill set to apply to this, to really design how that application looks and behaves. Okay. Another really cool example that I think we talked about, right, but is field rep finder, or being able to find a distributor or a servicer. Something that we run into is we work with a lot of customers that, whether they sell through franchises or they have physical locations, we have a customer that has thousands and thousands of physical locations throughout the United States, and they need to route customers. So their service team isn't taking tickets and they're saying, hey, I have this issue. They're trying to diagnose it remotely. And if they get to a point where they're like, hey, we're not going to be able to fix this for you, we need to send you somewhere. Now what we're doing is people go and copy an address, they paste it in, they say, try to find a nearby location. What hours does that location have? Do they actually serve customers like this? All of that can get automated, and they can just punch in here and say, hey, which field service locations do we want to access them to or connect them with? And then you can even add buttons that are like, I'm going to call that location. I'm going to send an email to this person with the information of that location, and I can trigger that email straight from the page. Or perhaps I want to be able to create other data inside of HubSpot, create a ticket for this contact and associate it to that field service location so that they know that they need to work on this. And so you can really start to expand so much of these functions, where today, usually how this works is you're kind of trying to configure some of those workarounds inside of HubSpot. And at the smaller end of that customer segment, people are, oh, wow, this is awesome. This is better than what I have. But if you have any of these bespoke applications in your organization, either that your team has built, you've worked with a partner to build, maybe you built on another platform, you can power all of this inside of HubSpot, and you can build it all fully native to HubSpot itself. And this could look up data either in HubSpot or outside of HubSpot as well. So it doesn't matter whether you're storing that in your HubSpot portal already. Another cool example is SLA Monitor. So this one is a great example because what this is doing is it's grabbing information and data on this record, both from the record itself as well as related objects. And we're then showing on this record calculated, summarized information based off of rule sets. So you could take this exact same example and you could expand it to not just an SLA monitor, but maybe you want to know, I used that ABM example already, right? Like what is my penetration in this account across a whole bunch of different interactions, or how many times have we interacted with this customer in the last couple of months? How many incidents have they reported? And being able to create that context to the person that is looking at this record and know exactly what's happening, and not having them, oh, let me go look at a report or let me comb through some of these fields, but grabbing information from this record, associated records, calculating that information and rendering it to that user so that they just have a lot more context about how they're working with it. And so I know for each of these examples, these are very much jumping off points just to give you ideas of what you are capable of and what you can actually do. And what we're going to do is we're gonna transition into Q&A, unless Amy wants to expand on anything, which I do a terrible job of opening for, but I want to make sure if you want to say anything, you can.
So you're fine. The only thing I was going to say on the SL Monitor use case here is this comes up a ton with people who want sort of like health performance or a health indicator or a health check for an account or a contact or a ticket, whether that's a service team or a sales member. We get a lot of feedback where people say, we wish HubSpot would just redefine XYZ to match what our business need is. And this really allows you to do that. So if you can imagine a world where you, a service rep, opens up a company record and you can quickly see this is based off of our business logic and how we think about the health of a relative account, the prescribed health of this account. Here's maybe some actions that I might suggest doing to improve the account, whatever it might be. So just that, not simply an overview of the actions or activities or properties or data of a given record, but the actual overview of the value or the health of that record as it is in the context of your business is a use case we see all the time. But beyond that, I'm happy to transition to Q&A.
Cool. So we'll jump to Q&A. If you go one more, also, we're going to do Q&A. I see a bunch in here, but if you have questions, throw them in the Q&A. We're going to work to answer as many as we possibly can here. There's a lot of them in here, but do throw them in here. We'd be more than happy to answer them. And if you go on to the next slide, we just grabbed some of our core examples here, but we have, if you scan this QR code, and Justin, if we can throw that link into the chat for everyone, that'd be amazing. I can only send it to host and panelists. We have a bunch more of these examples as well that you can look through, you can access with write-ups of how some of them work, and that you guys can sort of see or share either with your customers, your prospects, for your own team to be able to see them and understand them, either QR code or that link. And so with that, we'll transition a little bit to some of the Q&A, which is in here. And please submit stuff, and we would be delighted to answer them for you. One of the questions that I actually saw a couple of questions kind of in this vein and in this category, which is, if you want to get started being a HubSpot developer and you're excited about these types of things and you want to really understand how to get better at it, I would extensively recommend HubSpot Academy. Puts out a lot of content. And there was an answer earlier in the QA, and I can try to find that, of John McLaren, who's a developer advocate. I would follow the developer advocates at HubSpot on LinkedIn, connect with them. They're also incredibly nice people. I know most of them. They're wonderful. They'd love to hear from you. They put out a lot of content and resources. The other thing I would suggest, which is not necessarily just a plug for A8, but there's a lot of amazing solution partners in the ecosystem. The best place to get the most experience building and developing these types of things for a wide range of different use cases is to work with a solutions partner, and to really hone your skills with a partner who does that type of work, because you'll just see a lot of use cases where we have customers that build one or two of these, but our team is building all sorts of them all of the time for so many different use cases. And I think that's the best place to get a lot of real-time interactions with folks, is to get exposure to that type of a team. And Amy, I'm going to answer and scroll. So if you saw one in between and you want to take it, you are welcome to. Otherwise I will scroll and grab one.
That sounds good. One thing I will note is there was a question on HIPAA compliance and HIPAA information. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any thoughts, Connor, but generally speaking, HubSpot's not a HIPAA compliant tool, right? So storing, displaying HIPAA data in HubSpot is not compliant. That being said, if you have a HIPAA compliant tool, or a HIPAA compliant space in which you store that information, assuming it's hosted elsewhere, right? It's not like hosted on HubSpot. There are solutions here and there. I think that one of our dev advocates put an answer in here, so I'll actually type that out in there. But I just wanted to call that out because we get that question all the time, right? Like, is this a way in which to store HIPAA data in HubSpot? The short answer is no. HubSpot.
Yeah. Store in HubSpot, definitely not. I think for Bill's answer, we have an example in that guide that I linked that has one for HIPAA compliance. What we've done before is create an iframed UI extension that accesses that data from a HIPAA compliant system. The key here is you never want to store that information inside of HubSpot, but you can allow for users who are working in HubSpot to collect that information or allow users in HubSpot to access that information. But that is dependent on you have another system that is HIPAA compliant and you are iframing and OAuthing to that system, and you are not storing that data inside of HubSpot, which is not something that you want to do. And so, as with all HIPAA compliant stuff, talk to your lawyer, talk to your legal counsel, make sure what you're doing is good. But full stop, you don't want to store HIPAA compliant data in HubSpot. Is not something that you want to do. Benjamin asked a question around maintaining a server, or is there a no code way to do it? So I think for the first part of the question is that the whole value of doing this on the React modules is you don't need an external server. You're not hosting this anywhere. It's all running inside of HubSpot itself. And for the iframe applications, like that HIPAA one we talked about, right? The reason you can do that is you're not storing any of that data in HubSpot. You're just sort of showing an external HIPAA compliant database for it. But for Benjamin's question on, do you need to maintain a proper server? The whole benefit of the React extensions is you don't need to do that at all. All the code runs in HubSpot. It's hosted in HubSpot. You don't need to maintain it or store it anywhere else. From Clayton, how about connecting a mapping system to show each reps where their customers are, put this on the reps contact, then display where the customers are compared to them? Definitely. That's an amazing application that you could build, and you could put it with the context from the contact record, related data, that field service rep finder or location finder works on very much that same principle, where you can interact with like the Goal Maps API, send in location information and sort of plot distance between points or something to that effect. Really, really powerful. I think for a lot of organizations that either do field service or have physical locations, being able to tie in mapping data and surface that in the context there is extremely, extremely powerful. From Casey, who you can Slack me this, dude. Casey I work with, but name of the line item module, something for React. So I think we can give you the actual access to that, but I think the line items themselves is sort of that example, and those are running on React. John is thanking for the dev advocates. John's amazing, and you should follow John McLaren. And anytime that people ask me about development level stuff, I'm always pointing them to John. So you're very, very welcome, John. And there are some amazing examples here for the UIE that Amy just shared in the chat also. Question on budget or timeline for some of these, and knowing that these vary, but how do you build for some of these pieces? Or they think that it can be a huge investment, and can they reuse something that's built for another organization? Big question. I'll try to condense it as much as I can. The key component of some of these UI extensions, and I think that this ties to someone asked earlier around the skill sets that are required. Very rarely is this going to, and this is true of any application, anyone that's worked in product will be acutely aware of this pain. It is very rarely, hey, we want to build this app. Awesome. Let's just set up the front end and now it works, right? You're probably going to have some data model decisions. You're going to have some business process decisions. You really need to design and map out how is this application going to work. And so for us, when we build these, we have a combination of UI and UX design, a solutions architect or solutions consultant that's sort of designing the business process and the data model and the flow, and then a developer who's then building that module on the front end. The development of the modules themselves is pretty lightweight and pretty easy. The one developer in an afternoon could build you a full working React component that does a whole bunch of really cool stuff. The rub comes into the product design and the database and the process design, and where does that application fit in that customer journey? And that's really the thing that you need to solve for. And I think I saw another question earlier around, hey, I'm more on the admin side and I want to maybe get into some of this stuff. My suggestion to folks would not necessarily be, if you are not a developer by trade and you are not drawn to like hands-on keyboard coding, you can absolutely still work in and develop and work on these projects with people. And the majority of that work is going to be in designing that application, what it does, what it's capable of, which object it lives on, what data it interacts with. That is not for the end developer to actually be working with. And I think being able to design that solution, write up that spec, and work with technical resources to put it into place is an incredibly valuable skill set. And if you have a lot of background on the administrative or the RevOpsy side, that's a pretty natural sort of draw an extension of what your skill set is today. And you can probably work with a React developer and help them get up to speed and understand some of those places too. I think that that's like a great place to invest and spend that time. Warn against pitfalls, unforeseen pitfalls or hiccups. I think the main thing, and I think this is probably true of all product development, is that it is not magic. You still need to sort of design and figure out what is the problem we're trying to solve. How does a user get to this screen? What data is related and can I actually access from this record? And how can I create something that is there? And I think that the more time you can spend on the design of the solution and of the UI and making sure you get that first, the worst thing that can happen, and like we do it, right? I mean, I think we spend a lot of time extending and developing on top of HubSpot, and we even have projects that get into the situation where you maybe get some requirements, you build something, someone starts giving you edits, you start making a bunch of edits and doing something, and then you, after spending a bunch of time post development making a lot of those changes, you end up with this sort of like Frankensteinian thing that doesn't really accomplish any goals. And the best way to do this is to really take a product design methodology of really understanding what are you trying to build, how should it work, what are the expected outcomes, and then engineering a solution around that instead of jumping straight into development. I think the biggest risk that I would give somebody is if you don't have a development or a product background, and you are working with maybe a customer or a prospect who wants to build something in this arena, or if you're a HubSpot customer and you're looking for someone to build this with you, I would really ask around like, hey, do you guys have in-house developers? Do you have examples of some of these components? Is this something that you guys have done? Because, and if you're a partner, invest in those resources, right? Because I think you're going to have a really hard time taking from a customer who wants something to work and then saying, cool, we'll go build an application for it. Because it's an application, it's very different than I will send a design for a landing page to somebody and they will build that landing page and I will send an email over a link to that published landing page, because this is an application that needs to interact with data. It needs to be presented to users. There's a lot of moving parts that you want to make sure you anticipate and plan for. From Andy Johnson, would it be possible to develop an extension to get real-time updates, i.e. tracking related data? Yes, that was that SLA example that we gave you. So that React module can actually both render data from within HubSpot itself, as well as grab information from other systems or places outside of HubSpot, right? So if you wanted to grab data from another real-time service and combine it with HubSpot data and render it to that user when they look at that contact or look at that record, you could absolutely do that with those extensions. I think that's a very good example. That's also one that's pretty lightweight, right? I just did a bunch of warnings around like, don't build crazy stuff. That one's really lightweight, right? It doesn't have a lot of interaction. It doesn't have a lot of user journeys. That would be an awesome one to get started with, is like, can I show distance from a specific location based off of a user's address? And that's it in a React module. And you could render that right on the screen. And I think that's an excellent level 2 or level 3. If level 1 is sort of print hello world, that one's not that complicated to be able to build and expand upon for sure. From someone anonymous, want to feed data from another system into HubSpot, but the other application, or it says, does the other application need to have an API? Yes. If you want to access and interact with something via code, you would need an API for it. The simplest way to think about APIs is it allows for an application other than the one that you're working with to interact with that one. And so if it has no APIs and no ability to interface with it, it makes it extremely challenging for you to do those pieces. Something that we recommend and we work with a lot of customers on is digitizing and moving a lot of those products to kind of cloud solutions that have APIs. And that's a primary reason, is it's going to let you extend and expand and connect a lot of other applications in your overall stack to HubSpot or to anything else as well. Crushed a lot of these. I know that there's a couple that we probably won't have time to get here to, and we are at the top of the hour. Thank you guys so much for coming. Hopefully this was really insightful and inspiring to some folks. If you have questions on these, if you go forward to the next one, actually, I have my email, I have my LinkedIn, we have Amy's LinkedIn and Amy's email. We'd be happy to hear from you. If you are a customer, we build a lot of these things. We'd be happy to work with you. If you're a HubSpot employee, we do a lot in this arena. We'd be happy to work with you. And if you're a HubSpot partner and you're like, hey, this is really exciting, how do we do it? Like, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction and help. I think there will be far more people looking to build on this than I can possibly build and support. And so the more people that are building amazing things on HubSpot, the more the ecosystem grows at large, which is very much our goal. Amy, I offered you up in the same way. Is that true?
Yes, yeah, definitely. If you have any questions or concerns, whether they're questions about our roadmap, limitations within the product, send them my way. I'm happy to get answers where I can, if possible. And the other thing I would note is we shared a ton of externally facing resources, both in chat and otherwise we'll try to follow up with those after as well. But if you're missing anything and there's a resource that would be particularly helpful, let us know. We want that on our radar as well.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody, so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week.